Clerk, call the roll, please.
Dr. Ketchel, who is absent. Mr. Van Dwelling,
Here.
Ms. Gaines.
Here. Have a quorum, is that right?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so moving to the items, review and discussion is item 1362, which is the BOKF Foundation. There it is, okay.
Hi, Clint Boat, Tulsa County Assessor's Office. There's been an agreement on this one. Is the value of $10,600,000.
So that makes what, 10,600,000 on the form here.
Need to give them up right here.
By the way, I didn't sign it. So we'll get there.
I don't blame you.
Okay.
Based on agreement, I move that we set the fair market value for BOKF Foundation at $10,600,000.
I would second that.
Mr. Van Dwelling,
Yes.
Ms. Gaines.
Yes,
Carried, so that is 10,600,000. Sign it is.
You'll need to sign right here.
Should let you.
And you'll need to do it reason for adjustment. Your Ketchel usually writes that this is the fair market value by agreement. You can do- Make your own. I'll date it. I'll date them all electronically.
Item number 1. Item number 2. Is Qualified Investments LLC.
Tim Grass, with Tulsa County Assessor's Office. I don't know if you have to read in the formal number or not, but on formal number 1421.
Yep.
That we have agreed upon a value of 29,200.
2900.
29200.
29200.
Yes, sir. It's 29,200.
move that we set the fair market value for Qualcomm Investments by agreement to the amount of $29,200.
I second that.
Mr. Van Dwelling,
Yes.
Ms. Gaines.
Yes,
Okay. That's item number 1421. Should let my name.
No, you don't.
Oh, I don't have you, Dave.
I'll do that.
Sorry. Okay, moving to the next item on the agenda is Downtown Law Apartments LLC. Byron Burke.
Yes, sir. Oh, do we have a picture of the building? It might help. See that somebody besides me. What we have is a property that's on the southeast corner of 11th and Denver.
Yeah.
And right now, if you were to look at the building, there's a lot of construction materials on that lot adjacent to it. I think they're unrelated to what's going on in the building, but the building's totally boarded up. My client bought it for $895,000 in 2018, I believe, and operated it for a couple of years. And it was kind of a ragtag outfit. I mean, the way this thing was being operated. And he had an idea to empty the building out and to totally renovate it. And he was going to copy what happened over like the Coliseum apartments where someone redid that. And they redid them for more like for service people, small apartments that are affordable for waiters and bartenders and things like that. That was kind of the idea behind it. So anyway, he goes in and he gets the building inside and COVID hits. And so what's happened now is the clientele that he hoped to attract as tenants in this have all moved home and are living with mom and dad again. And so there's really not a market for him to go ahead and finish the project. So if you go inside, it's just one great big gutted building. And so hopefully in the next year or two, he'll get a building permit and finish the project. But what we're asking is that he paid $895. He had an income producing property that he bought, and then he gutted it. So now we have a shell, and it's strictly a COVID casualty. So we were asking to lower the value a couple $100,000 to reflect the fact that it's now a gutted shell instead of a income producing property. Bad timing.
Assessor,
What are you asking for the?
Well, I think they actually asked 400,000, which might have been a little aggressive looking at it now, but I mean, it's a nice location. It's a good piece of land, but it's a, sorry.
I'm sorry, is it my turn or are you finished?
No, I'm sure that's really all I have.
Sarah Alcott, Tulsa County Assessor's Office. I understand the plight and the argument of the owner of this property being interrupted with COVID and actually purchasing the property while it was still occupied somewhat at the time. We're actually not too far off here. We have it currently valued at $895,200, which is, the breakdown of that is $15,434 per unit. When I initially looked at this property, that stood out to me in particular because I know of other properties in the TU and just vicinity north of TU area that are burned out, that are valued in the $9,000, $10,000 range, price per unit range.
you said burned out?
Burned out.
Literally burned out?
Burned, a shell. So when I looked at this and I looked at the $400,000 request for fair market value, that equates to roughly $7,000 per unit, give or take a few dollars. So to me, that seemed kind of low. However, I mean, I'll give you my packets. This is an unusual situation in the way that property itself, once it's renovated, will be worth considerably more given the downtown market right now. But I'll have you take a look at this. So on the front page, I just have the property details that we've already discussed. It's definitely a Class B apartment. Has a lot of potential, but for now it's a Class B. I've got my income pro forma. I didn't bring a copy to share.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, let's share. I've got my income pro forma here. It's got quite a low rent placed on it at about $460 a unit is what I placed on it. It has 60 units. I gave it as a 17% vacancy in collection because that's just submarket for the
It
downtown area.
has.
I'm sorry.
You said it has vacancy or
Well, it's
it's
100.
totally vacant.
It's actually 100% vacant right now. But in terms of the pro forma and mass appraisal, we have to make the assumption that it still could be an income producing property. If I gave it 100% vacancy, it'd be worth zero, right? So I'm giving it submarket at 17%. I've given it some generous expenses because of the condition and class, 9% cap rate, which is definitely loaded. And the in conclusion, less business personal property is about a little over $1.2 million. I've got some rent and equity comparisons here below my income. We have some other apartments. If you look at the very next page, I have some photos here. And these are my rent and equity comparisons. I didn't really have any good sale comparisons because of the condition of the building. There aren't a lot of them selling, especially during the COVID year, they weren't moving. I have Diana Apartments, Blair Apartments, and Riviera, which are all similar year built, all in the early 1900s, 1920s. They all bring about the same square foot rent as downtown lofts. If you look especially at Riviera, it brings a little bit, and this is all CoStar information on square foot rent. It brings a little bit less at square foot rent, and we still have it valued at almost $16,000 a unit. And that's about where we sit right now. However, Riviera Apartments are occupied. I'm not going to make a super heavy argument against lowering this value. I just, like you said, I thought 400,000 was
It's a little aggressive.
a little aggressive, but I'll present it this way to the board. In Byron's favor, in his argument, they are planning to renovate it at some point. When they do that, we'll have a building permit. We'll go out and we'll add value.
Yeah, you'll be able to pick up the value.
We'll be able to pick up the value on it once it's renovated. And I drive by there every single day on the way to work. I know the condition of the building well.
Put a fence around it, you can't see it.
But this is just for your purposes to review the market value of the building. I feel at $895,200 is probably what an investor would pay for it today unoccupied. That's my opinion based on my income pro
What's it?
forma.
It hasn't changed hands. Right?
I think 2018.
Yeah, 2018, my client acquired it and then, and operated it and then decided to renovate it. And these are really small apartments that they make. I mean, some of these have like Murphy beds and they're like little efficiencies, but he gutted it. I mean, there's no walls in this thing. You can shoot a cannon at one end, hit the back wall.
What did you say about the burned out units around TU? They were going about 10,000.
$9,000 or $10,000 a unit. They're completely unoccupiable, as this building is currently.
So if we set these at what, 9.5, what would we come
What am I
How
counting?
many units did you show render?
I
There's no way of knowing because there were
up?
in units.
I had some conflicting information. The assessor's office has 58 units. CoStar has 60 units, and the original sales affidavit report had 60
Okay,
units.
good. Okay, so it's probably 60.
Yeah, and can we remind the board, if you have that information, Byron, what it sold for in
It's sold for $895.
Okay.
In 2018.
And it was basically in the same position, condition
No,
where it was being lived.
it was an income producing property. But it was a rough clientele. I mean, if you ever drove by there, you saw people kind of falling down, walking out of there. But I mean, he ran the deal and he's pretty good at running this type of property. But he made this decision to upgrade it. And I mean, it's not going to be the Ritz-Carlton he's done, but I mean, it's going to be a viable piece of property, within the next, hopefully 18 months, 2 years.
Well, in the master scheme of things, at some point in time, they can work more than $800.
Oh, absolutely, you bet.
We're on the road to that. So,
to answer Ms. Gaines' previous question, if we placed a per unit value of $9,500 per unit at 60 units, that would produce a fair market value of $570,000.
I decided to make it a little simpler and put it at the 10, make it 600,000.
Yeah, I think he'll just be happy. There's some recognition that he's kind of taking value away and having to hold it for a while.
so would you move to 600?
I moved that we set the fair market value at $600,000.
Second.
Mr. Vanderwall,
Yes.
Ms. Gaines,
Yes.
Yeah.
Two places to go down there.
No, that's correct.
Okay, so
you're in,
Yeah,
right?
we got a second.
so far, so good. I'm learning.
The village on that page, I'm not sure. Yeah, you're right here. Maybe a storm.
Fair value.
What was
This is the
yours?
fair market value for basement condition.
The 727.
That is baby.
Is that village?
Well, it's Village on Main is the name of it. It's the Village on Main Park. It's such
Oh,
a.
okay. Okay. 727.
Yeah, that's right.
Sign.
This is what happened. I'm not sure how to do the storm damage.
Next one.
What you got? No, yeah.
Agree.
What
Oh,
next?
Like 16 units long. All year long. And they're still. What they expect is construction. Because if they're twice. Large friction system.
Okay, we've got an agreement on.
Storm damage.
We got an agreement on this.
So I don't- something to do with it.
What do you need?
nothing after January.
You're
I don't
against
know. You can do it before the first night.
I'll get you better.
Yeah, 1420.
Who's presenting?
Chart. Agreement number and the name.
So what's,
And my next.
The next one on the agenda, if you'll read the protest number and the name.
Last protest number 1423.
Scott.
Count 323.
Yep, Clintfield, Tulsa County Assessor's Office, we've come to an agreement on this one as well. The agreed upon value is $6,250,000.
6,250,000.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I move that we set the fair market value for Scout 323 LLC at all at $6,250,000.
I would second that.
Mr. Vanderwall,
Yes,
Ms. Gaines,
Yes.
fair value is $6,250,000.
you don't have to
She's
take
okay.
it.
Okay, y'all, you got that?
You got to put your reason in there.
This is the fair value.
Based on agreement.
This is what we've been talking. So, yeah.
To defer it to the next. You'll need to vote to defer these.
Oh, okay, yeah. This is fair value based on.
Agreement.
On agreement.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay,
Okay,
this is the,
that was fair, that's fair.
no,
It says fair, FAI. Okay, I've, the next three items. Acquisition, Boston.
it will take each one.
One separate.
Yeah, and you won't write on that.
Okay. Protest number 1424. I've got to recuse because I'm gonna climb. This one, the next two,
Mhm.
so I just shut up and listen.
If you'll vote to defer it,
I move that we refer case number 1424, mid-con acquisition.
Second,
Mr. Vanderwilling?
Yes.
Ms. Gaines?
Yes.
okay, so.
you don't need to write it.
Nothing on that.
Protest number and their name.
Okay, we're moving to, let me catch up on my paper. Protest number 1425. 11 Mid-Continent Acquisition LLC.
I move to defer.
Can I second that even though?
Yes,
Can I second?
yes. Are you seconding?
Yes.
Mr. Vanderwilling?
Yes.
Ms. Gaines?
Yes. To defer.
Do I sign it all on this one?
No, we'll do that when you want. Actually.
Okay, we're moving to item number 1426. That's also, that's a Bumgarner building, right?
Yes.
320 Austin. I've got to, around that.
I move to defer.
Second,
Mr. Vanderwilling?
yes.
Ms. Gaines?
Yes.
Okay, we're moving to protest number 1427. WRT Realty Inc. That's okay, Brian?
That's mine. Found, as I was doing research, I found something really cool. I got to show everybody on this thing. This is the building in 1910, I believe, or 1912. It was the Ford dealership at North Main and Cameron. So this is actually one of the oldest. I'll show this. This is one of the oldest.
Main runs east.
North and south. North Main.
Oh,
Cameron's east, so it's like
Oh, they're back good.
Reconciliation and then Cameron. But yeah, and they sell all those Model Ts parked out front. But I just got the biggest kick when I was at Wally Tipsword's office. Wally's pushing about 100 years old and he's got this kind of stuff in his
The
office.
building is still there.
Yeah, I mean, so it was redone. What we had, this is Prairie. And that's one of the reasons we're here today is the Prairie was a restaurant and brew pub that didn't survive the last year. And so we have a really large vacant space downstairs. This area over here is just 36 degrees north. It's a deal that was done by Mayor Taylor. Has put some seed money into this. And this building is kind of an entrepreneurial I'm trying to think of the right term to put. I mean, this is kind of like a place where they're planting seeds and hoping that somebody that's moved to Tulsa will come up with the next Microsoft or something. And plus we have the upstairs has some offices and apartments. You didn't get to see that. But when we toured, you went through, there's some smaller, well, they're all different sizes in this building, but this is just something I want to kind of walk through with you about that. So the first page is the subject. And what I've highlighted on there is the fact it's a subject. And the land values down there are real consistent as far as all being pretty much the same throughout that 6 or 8 block area. But what I'm focused on is the improvement values here. And so I have, those are the values per square foot on improvements. And if you look at the back, it'll show you a little outline where this building is located. And of course, that is the subject. But as you look at other ones, you'll see where the asterisk will show you where the subject is to these, what I'm using is comparable assessments. So what we have is we have a building that is basically used as an incubator, trying to generate new businesses and things in Tulsa. These guys are not doing anything that would make sense in the marketplace, because they'll rent space down there for $9 a foot to help somebody get an operation going when really the market rate's much higher. And so, we're not, as you go through this, you'll see we're not really asking for a break on our value. We're trying to make our value similar as the properties around us. And so my listed value of 300,000.
Like 3 million.
Sorry, $3 million. Sorry. Can't read. If you take the requested value of $3 million and back the land off to where we're just talking building, because land seems pretty well equalized down there, I'm asking for a $2.7 million value on land. And with 36,960 square feet, I'm asking you to place the building value at $73 a foot. So what I ask you to do is to look at the other buildings and realize I'm asking for 73, and that's pretty much in line with the highest stuff down there. And there's plenty of stuff that's lower. And, really with a vacancy and with low rents and with this thing being kind of an entrepreneurship spot, we ought to be asking for less. We ought to be saying, well, we really ought to be worth less money. And so all we're asking is to be valued kind of the same as everybody else.
And you're asking what per square foot?
$73 on the building. You'll see we're currently at $97.82. And I'm asking $73.12. So if you look at that value on the comps, you'll see that I'm not asking for a value that's really absurd compared to a lot of stuff down there. A lot of this other stuff's rented at $20 a foot. As opposed to $9. You weren't there. When we walked through, for example, what they'd like to do with this prairie, I mean, the use of this prairie restaurant and the brewery in there is they'd like to find a startup, a minority interest that would go in there and they would back them to start a new restaurant. And that's the way this property is being used.
So does it have a brewery in there now?
It's closed. It didn't survive.
Okay, that's not the Marshall.
No, sir. This is prairie. So the idea is that we could attract someone in here, and the same's true of one of the buildings we did earlier. We have a lot of space that's rented like at $9 a foot when the market's really much higher. The $9 really reflects kind of the operating cost of the building. So they're kind of putting people in there and saying, well, taxes, insurance, and maintenance and everything is going to be this, and they rent it kind of as a break-even deal. So it's not, the funny thing is, if we're trying to appraise, we wouldn't do it this way. But in Oklahoma, they allow for a use value. And the use of this building as an incubator, I think is a valid use to value it. But we're not trying to go to half the value or nothing. We're just simply saying, put us on like everybody else and we'll be happy. Check those cars.
Okay, so, this is a different kind of property in the way that it was, from what I read about it, I did a little bit of research here. I guess it was subsidized in its renovation by, was it Kaiser Foundation?
I think most of it was by Mayor Taylor, was a lot of it's a group of people who went in together and did this. Like
Okay.
north, 23 degrees north is
Yeah.
Taylor.
Okay. From what I've read about it is that it was, the renovation was a subsidized kind of effort, not necessarily charitable or religious in any way that would create an exemption situation on the whole property. Although 36 degrees north, that portion of it is already exempt. Which accounts for about 40% of the square foot of the property, I believe. But this property was renovated in 2016 for the purpose, like Mr. Burke said, bringing in basically creativity and artistic works, artistic minds to Tulsa to kind of cultivate and push forward more culture within Tulsa, which is a great effort. However, when we look at this property, we have to look at it as it is, which is an income producing property. We have to value it based on the potential income. And I'm not sure, I know there's a break-even situation that they aim for, according to Mr. Burke, in terms of the rents on the property. I don't know why they don't have their not-for-profit yet, or if it is going that direction or not, but I'm not sure of that status.
Yeah, Prairie couldn't be, I mean, because it's
Right.
not, doesn't matter what you use the money for, it's a matter of what is really going on.
Okay. So on the first page here, I just have the property details. The current assessor value is $3,912,954. Now, the exempt portion is valued at $1,440,436. That's what's not listed in here. So actually, the current listed value plus the exempted value, if that business moved out of there, it would likely lose its exemption and we would add over $1.4 million to the current fair market value. that we
And
have.
that to the 3 point.
Yes, sir. It would end up being about 5.35 million.
If what now?
If that portion of the building where 36 degrees north is
Okay.
was not exempted, what we've taken that chunk of value and said, okay, we're not gonna tax you on that, right? So essentially, the taxpayer requested value is $3 million. We have 23 apartments upstairs and 18,480 square feet of retail and restaurant on the ground floor. We currently have this property classed as an A-class property. If you'll turn the page, just to orient you to the actual location of this property. We have Universal Ford building here. You can see where it is and in proximity to Guthrie Green and One Up Stadium. It's a prime CBD property we have here in terms of location. Turn the page. I have my income approach available. Did I give you a copy, Byron?
Right?
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
I think
okay. So what I've done here is I didn't have actual rents on the property, but what I did, if you look to the right here under the rent comparables summary table, I have 5 properties of comparable rents listed. Universal Ford building being on the very bottom of that list. What I did was I looked at what things are renting for downtown to kind of get an idea of how I should estimate or calculate fair market rent on this property, not the actual rents, because it is a different kind of situation where there's going to be a return on investment culturally speaking in the city of Tulsa by asking these people to come and live here at a discounted rate. But when I'm valuing the property, we're talking about what it would sell for to a private investor on the market today. Okay, so I had to give it. You can see the range here on the square foot rent is between $1.39 and $2.07 for similar properties of this type that have been recently renovated to the condition that this property is in. What I did was I gave it $1.19 a square foot, and I calculated the potential gross income of the apartment space only based on that. Now, $1.19 is pretty generous considering the lowest comp on the rent I found was $1.39 a square foot is what it's going for. So using that $1.19 a square foot, I came up with $264,000 on potential gross income. I gave it a sub-market vacancy of 15%, which is pretty much what's happening right now in this area downtown. At the standard 3% management expense. I gave it a slightly higher operating expense than I would normally give a property like this, like 30-35%, because it's been so recently renovated. You're not going to have those higher operating expenses and maintenance issues and things like that. But I gave it 45% because of its unique situation with the types of people that they're renting to and the fact that, it is an organization that's a little bit different. So I gave the reserve price per unit $350 a unit, which is pretty generous. I could have gone down to $200 or $250 a unit, but I gave it a generous reserve. So what we have here is an NOI. This is a little bit different than what we're used to looking at because this is a mixed use property. So I have to come up with a net operating income for the first floor retail and a net operating income for the apartments. Now, those are two different things. What I did was added them together. The first floor retail has a different vacancy and collection rate. It has different operating expenses and so forth. It's very different than apartment operating expenses. So what I did was add those together. And when I give it a blended cap rate of about 7, properties like this are selling in the 5.5% to 6% cap rate range right now. So I loaded that cap at 7. My value is at $5,781,251. Now, that is $1.56 a square foot. But if we look back to the front page, when you consider the assessor current value plus the 1.4 million of exempted value, that's still $5.35 million. So my income is coming in really, really close, around $5.5 million to what the assessor currently has fair market value on the property. And then let me turn the page here. If you guys wanted to see what I've got back here. Here are some photos of the rent comparisons that I used. If you want to, the Ford building is down here on the second row here on the right-hand side. But if you want to look through some of these, you can see these are some of the other buildings that I'm comparing them to. And the reason I chose these is that all of these buildings are old and have been recently renovated in the last 4 or 5 years. So the reason why I took rent comps from these is because here we have an old building that has been recently renovated to the standard in which these buildings have, and their rent should be similar. Okay. So basically, our CAMA system, our cost CAMA system has it costed at $4.82 million. That's not something that I want to rely on heavily on a cost approach on this type of building, because we're talking about replacement cost new less depreciation. And that's hard to arrive at when you have a shell of a building that's fully brick that's been there since, well, we saw the picture of the original building. And then you go in and you gut it and renovate it. That's different than building it from ground up. So I think what our CAMA system is trying to estimate here is, it's not exactly to be relied upon in this type of situation where you have a renovation of a 100-year-old building. It's more an estimate of a newer property or a newer building. But it's at about $5 million on the cost value. I have building permits that were issued for the renovation in the amount of $3 million. Now, if you look at building permits, we know on a big renovation like this, it doesn't include all the work, the soft cost of land, the existing structure value, or the profits. So we'd have to add all that in, which would drive it up, in my opinion, twice as much to market value of around $6 million. My pro forma supports $5.78 million as stabilized I know they're having a little issue with Prairie.
Yeah, they don't even have possession of the space back yet. It's tied up in foreclosure and who gets the equipment, bankruptcy, it's a mess. So they can't even lease it right now. But,
Yeah, it's,
let me ask one thing real quick, because I'm confused about one thing you said. Now, on this value here, where it shows a value of 3.9 million, that value comes over to here, and the exemption comes off here. So it's not that you would add the exemption on to that, that's the total value that, and that's what I used.
oh.
So your exemption,
Where'd Jennifer go? Did I find it? Oh.
Yeah, you did.
I did that wrong. Sorry.
yeah, so the value I'm showing you here is the market value of the property with ignoring the exemption completely.
Okay.
And it's because exemption is just exemption. I agree, if they moved out, we'd lose it. If we add to it, well, it'll be greater, but there's a not-for-profit, the 36 degrees north is a not-for-profit entrepreneur space and resource and offices that are for people that basically you see a whole lot of, I went by there this morning, there were all these really young guys with their laptops walking in, so, but these people from all over the world that have come in here to work there, but when the value you see here is the value the county's using for the full value.
What
Okay.
is that value?
Yeah.
Okay.
The 9782 on here,
That's per square foot.
yes, and that is the improvement value per square foot that they're using. And then you deduct the exemption from that, but I'm not doing that. I'm saying here's full value and just let the exemption landwork pay. The exemptions of no consequence.
So
to the-
you've included the entire building.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, I have the
Okay,
whole
I was
thing.
adding it instead of subtracting it.
I thought, I got confused.
So in other words, it's way more undervalued than I thought, I think.
Well, and I'd argue it's valued somewhat based, that it's valued somewhat based on its use. And I think that's what we have to look at.
Based on,
Use, the use of the property. Anybody buying it, if they were going to maintain that use, would not pay. I agree with her. If it was fair market, we were looking to buy something and not have low rental opportunities for entrepreneurs, and yeah, it'd probably be worth more. But the way we're using it right now is as an incubator for new business and with low rents. That's the use.
did you look at his?
I did, he's got a comp set here that he pulled from our website. Some of these properties, I would beg to differ that they are recently renovated and or in the same position on Main Street frontage, downtown Tulsa. Yeah, I don't know, if I had a map of them, I could tell
Well, just
better.
on the back, right on the back of
Oh,
the
okay.
showing. So you can see what I did is here's where we're located, and here's where that comp is located.
This one comp here, okay.
Yeah, just on that one, each card I've marked, I'm sorry, I didn't tell you like I told you what I had done, but
I do know that, okay, of the buildings that I have placed value on in the last few years that have been recently renovated, that are apartment mixed-use buildings, we are seeing them come in about $1.50-ish in that range. I mean, $150,
renovation.
excuse me, $150 a square foot range on the value, the valuation. So I didn't see, this one didn't surprise me at all to see that it's in the $150 square foot range. Not only that, per my income, it's in the $150 square foot range at $5.8 million. Okay. And
That's
then
the apartments.
that's the apartments and the retail space. That's the whole enchilada. I'm saying is about $5.8 million, which is equates square foot wise to 150 a square foot. Now he's got a lot of these that are showing assessor value in the 90s and 70s and 80s range per square foot. However, I can't verify that these have had the same level of renovation that they have docketed. I think there's a that building is highly comparable to the build out and quality of this building. I'm not sure if it was the same people but they had an agreement. I think it was 10 million plus on the very first hearing today.
10-6.
They agreed to about $148, $146 maybe a square foot on that property. So that was agreed upon. And it is a highly, if not the most comparable property to this build out.
Yeah, with one major exception, I mean, that building at 10 million, the vast majority of the downstairs is rented to businesses. There's the bookstores in there, Glacier Chocolates in there. There's a couple of restaurants in there, and they're, we just looked at that as a different than this, where our ground floor is occupied by an incubator.
I think that property does it also have the same agenda, the same rent issue with bringing artists in and,
Yeah,
kind of the same.
This is the first year I've worked that building, so we don't have an exemption on it yet. We think we will. There's one I'd point out that's in here, and it's this Green Arch. It's the third property. And it's mixed use. I mean, there's a restaurant and bar downstairs. There's an office. There's a yoga place. And this is called Green Arch. The property, the last 5 digits is 31010. And that's a brand new building. That's just like a 3-year-old. And so it's mostly multifamily above. And believe me, it's much nicer multifamily than what's in my building. And it has an overall improvement value of $66 a foot.
It's on Greenwood.
It's right there. I mean, the new Greenwood Center is right across the street. Same people gave the land for that as this building.
And it's multi,
It is it is multi-use.
okay, I'm
Retail
very
on the
familiar
bottom,
with this
apartments on
property.
the top.
There's a bar. I mean, there's Lefties is in there on the corner, and then there's a yoga place, and there's a couple other things in there.
This property is multi-use. It's older in terms of some of the newer builds downtown and newer renovated properties. Its interior finishes are such that are not the same. They're not as nice. They don't garnish the same rents. I want to say, I just looked at this property as a comp. I think they're renting somewhere in the neighborhood of 95 cents a square foot for the apartments, which is extremely low in this area. And that's due to the quality of the apartments themselves. They're just, and the exterior facade and finish is not, it's more wood than brick, for instance. I mean, it's a completely different build out in terms of the materials. I would even class this one as a B versus an A property, which is what we're looking at today.
Well, and I'll go to the fourth one, which is going to be called Robinson Packer. It ends in 27880. This is a similar deal where the upstairs is got very nice apartments in it, and the downstairs is all retail. It's across the street from the subject, and it's at $71 a foot.
When was this renovated?
They're showing year remodel 2018. This is where the violin store is. There's a couple of restaurants in this little deal. It's a 3-story building that's in there.
Oh, I was just there this morning. I know what you're talking
It's where you had breakfast.
about. Where I got bit by a dog.
Oh.
Actually, trying to take a picture of this subject property.
Anyway, that's kind of what we have. I just feel like if you value based on use and value uniformly with properties in there, that, it would allow this thing to operate at lower expenses than what it currently is.
Am I wrong in assuming that this is something that's great on its way to happening that ain't there yet?
The subject building? Well, I mean, it came out of the blocks pretty fast, but then when Prairie went belly up, and that's that's about over probably 40% of the downstairs.
Prairie is,
Prairie, the restaurant.
yeah.
So you're looking at,
Yeah.
I mean, they still got the moose hanging on the wall in this place and all those brew deals. Hopefully some other person will come up and brew beer. If not, then the remodel on this is going to be incredibly expensive. Because it's got all the lines.
Move Marshall Road.
It'd be nice, yeah. Too bad the whole thing didn't burn.
Well, I'd like to bring the board back to, let's back around to the fact that we just settled on that previous property, the first one heard today. Extremely similar build out down to the floor, ceiling height, materials, etc. Similar use in that the apartments are used for the same purpose. The the fact that they don't have any exemptions is a moot point. And we just settled on that for about $150.
What was
Square
that per
foot.
square foot?
Yes. you see
What, 150?
Did you bring that up for the board to see that, the bill? That you're gonna do good? It's just one.
They're at
Because of what we're doing.
97.
So, but no, good job.
What was 85 per square foot?
I know our lists, our set of comparable properties are very, very different. The rent comparables, like I said, sale comparables are impossible to find right now on these type of properties in this district. But the rent comparables, you can't argue with the fact that
3,140,000.
those are very much the same in terms of square foot rent.
This is the one that's on our street, so we're looking at that.
Yeah,
Get the agreement.
It's a larger building for. Yeah, it really is. If I could, I'll just give you a little tour of it. I mean, this is back where the Jazz Club and what's the name of that restaurant?
Duet.
Duet, thank you. Yeah, Duet's back here. And, you come across here and you have, one of these is the bookstore, but this is all retail through here. This very end of it's got some apartments, but the vast majority of this is studios where you go in some of them, there's a kiln, or you go in one and there's a metalworking shop. And then there's all these facilities in there where like copy machines. And so it's the same thing. They brought in all these people from all over the world. This is where people were coming in and getting paid a stipend to live in Tulsa and and they live in this building, they work in that building. And so the upstairs is, about this much of it's apartments. And then from here over and all the way back, it's a really large building. You see is these studios. And we value those like warehouses, I think. Warehouses type, did we on the studios? So we have three different uses in there. But to me, it's just a better building than the subject. And it has more viable retail downstairs than we do.
I think it's a larger building with a extremely similar finish and similar use. In that the tenants in the apartments are artists, they're getting a discount on their rent to come and live here, or even stipends to come and live here. Similar type of use, and it was settled at roughly $150 a square foot. I don't see much difference between the use, the construction, et cetera, other than the size. And typically a smaller square foot building will be a little higher cost per square foot.
So you think 97.82? Is that what you have it under?
I'm
What
sorry,
do you have it as per square foot on your rent?
per square foot, $156 a square foot is my recommendation, which would be a total value of the whole building, $5,781,251. Now, when I look at this building and what we just settled it for at 150 a square foot, and I'm looking at my recommendation of 156 a square foot on this building here, similar use, same build out, same year reno, et cetera, same location.
But we don't have the value of the 50. What did you just say? 5 million. We got 3,912,000.
That's the current assessor value.
That's what per square foot.
Oh, wait, let me see. Subject is 36,960. That's $1.05 a square foot,
You got it.
or 105.
Yeah.
I'm too.
105.86.
100, almost $106 a square foot. My opinion that it's worth closer to $150 a square foot if it were to sell in the fair market to a
But you
person.
don't have it on at that value.
I do not, ma'am. We currently have it on at $1, almost $1.06 or 106 a square foot. And I'm recommending 156 a square foot, which would be about what they just settled on per square foot for that property, which is highly similar, even in use.
With the exception of a major vacancy on the ground floor and a exempt unit on the ground.
I do have that. That can turn around anytime. I mean, it was vacant January 1. I drove by there and confirmed that. But I mean, going forward, it's occupiable. It should be.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt.
If you can get another brewer in there or get another tenant that wants to build out, it's occupiable.
We're about run out of the Marshall. I think there's no more.
We might have kind of gotten saturated with beer here. That may be part of the
We
problem.
have everything. we
Marshall
want.
boys were our troop.
Good guys, yeah, I know.
I'm saying, I'd go $100 a foot. 3,696. Further discussion, comments? I would put forth a value of $3,696,000. That'd be $100 a foot.
Second motion.
How much was that?
3,696,000.
And you made that a motion?
Yes, I did.
I did second that.
Mr. Van Willen,
Yes.
Ms. Gaines,
Yes.
But you got it. Did you read it?
Is that just a Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh.
This is the fair value for.
Is that applied? Or I'll take it. Well, I just don't, I can't make a copy like that.
Yeah, I don't want to like take your last copy and.
Do you need to put
I'm
a
a
reason?
person, if you want to book, you're never
Okay,
getting
I'll
back.
bring you a copy.
Why you
Bring me a
think so?
copy. I'm just being
Thank
honest.
you. Appreciate your candor.
And based on the use of the wheel. And
Yeah, I know, it's honest, things that make any sense in the marketplace.
This is very regulation. It's a strong.
It seems like it's so.
Well, yes, but I just wonder, the discussion running slightly.
I basically.
What did you say?
they're just similar-
Hey,
similar
I don't disagree with the approach.
Yeah.
I just.
That's what you-
Use the putting it to the statute, so.
I used to think it was some issues.
Not in phone, I mean, camera tonight. Common law, such for.
It's been a long time since I took unit classes. But they just. Yes.
Yeah. Well,
I hope they don't.
well, the tax commission would love it, and the judge Spellman would like it, written statute, constitution.
Sure. Yeah, you're right. Moving to number 1428, we have agreement on.
Yes, sir. You can stay here. Yes, sir. Tim Grass, Tulsa County Assessor's Office on hearing 1428. We have agreed to a value of $5 million.
that we set the fair market value for property number 1428 Vom Garage LLC at $5 million.
Second.
Mr. Van Wooley?
Yes.
Ms. Gaines?
Yes.
Carried.
Yes.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Oh, so this is.
Storm damage.
What about Swan Hill?
Well, we're gonna have a discussion.
Okay, that's fine.
Can you do that?
Okay. Moving to protest number 1429.
Let me just this. I think rather than me just get up and yak at you anymore, I mean, this is, thank you. This will kind of explain the situation, and I need to visit Spur, let me give you a copy. But I'm thinking that we were wondering January 1, this hadn't happened, but it's an act of God, storm damage wouldn't qualify. And other such reasons. Yeah, this is down in Jenks at the Village on Main. This is the bank building that's in there, and there's a parking garage between them. And then this has been built. For whatever reason, that hard freeze we had early in the year, on 2 occasions, froze the fire suppression system and knocked out 16 units, and they're not finished with the remodel yet. I mean, it took them offline. They were like at 68% occupancy at the time this thing hit. And they were able to move some of the people around. Some people moved out. But they ran into all kinds of problems with the remodel, trying to match tile and things that were in there, because a lot of the tile on the floor broke. But what the question we have, and both of us have it here, because I'm really not sure how you treat storm damage that occurs. It's my understanding that storm damage occurs before May 1. It does anytime during the year, that whenever you have an act of God that affects a property, even if it's after the assessment date, the value can be adjusted to reflect the loss.
Is that a temporary adjustment?
Yes, sir. And so, we just want to stay, within the statutes here, but I mean, I've seen whenever we've had big tornadoes and things, they've gone out on storm damage, floods, tornadoes. In this case, I feel like the freeze that we had and the effect it had on this building would qualify. And this got a little. We're talking about storm damage after the first year. She has my letter that explains it. I'm out of letters.
Tracy with Tulsa County Assessor's Office. I sent a copy of your letter to Lisa Weintraub just to confirm that this type of situation would qualify under the Act of God. So I'm hoping she responds back to me.
She's in a meeting.
And she's in a meeting, but she has told us that her cell phone would be on her. So I just want to let you know that I am checking into it. I do know that we do it for like floods and tornadoes and fires and everything, but this, I'm not sure how this one would qualify yet, and I don't want to answer that question until I get an answer back from her.
So you have a temporary dip in the overall value. And is that reflected on the property tax rolls temporarily?
Well, we're waiting to hear back on
is that the question?
Good
Are
question,
you
yeah.
entitled to adjustment for damage?
Did that just come up today?
Well, it was addressed during the informal, but I requested a cost of care and photos and I hadn't received them. I just received this today, so I didn't have any, in other words, anything showing me that this actually occurred, so I couldn't consider it. Also, I didn't have, it happened after the date of taxable situs, January 1, so typically we don't, unless it's like tornadoes, yeah, I know those are acts of God and those are things, but with water pipes bursting and things, I hadn't seen that been discounted under the act of God umbrella in our office, so I didn't pursue it any further, and then I didn't have any evidence or anything from Mr. Burke until today showing the cost or.
We don't even know, we really don't know the total yet.
I have your answer, and she said, yes, it would qualify for the, for that statute, that's based on the act of God, basically.
Okay, good.
So
we
it's
can't
entitled to a temporary dip, then it goes back.
Goes right back up.
How does that work with the CAT?
Once the repairs are made, then we put the money back on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's happened before. I mean, when I first went to work at the county, the first thing we did was June 8th tornado. And so, I mean, and so I know that we have always acted, even after the assessment date, if there's been a storm.
So based on being able to do that, what value would you set it at? For the assessment?
Let's see what he said. I mean,
So theoretically, it would be restored back to the 78679.
yeah, and we don't know at this point what the total cost is gonna be. And I don't know if he mentioned it. We were talking 800,000, but that's 700.
Uh-huh.
So you are saying it's entitled to a temporary dip?
Yes, it is, and then once the repairs are made, we'd be able to put whatever value you guys remove, then the following year, once it's all the repairs been made, we'll be able to put that exact value back on. And as
Is that
uncapped
something
funds.
that should be set by the assessor's office rather than come before the board?
You guys can set the amount that you would, based on the information that Mr. Burke has provided.
Yeah, if you were to just simply say 16% of the units are down.
So what you're requesting is what?
Let me look and see. The 16% would be like $1.2 million. That'd be 16% of the value because 16% of the units are out. We don't know what it's going to be. I think at this point they've spent 800,000, but they're still spending. I mean, so they're not, the units aren't back up yet.
So on your protest, you asked for 6,200,000.
7 9, so it'd be $1.7 million. It probably ought to be $1.2 million. I probably asked for too much. I think I asked for too much because I didn't know how much it was going to be.
Okay, so
So the assessor's current value is 7,679,500. So is that inclusive of the damage? Yep,
The damage hasn't been taken care of at this point.
okay. And that damage is what, lost revenue and repair?
Well, what I just did is I said, well, 16% of the units are down, 16% of that, what'd you say the value is, 7,600,000?
The value is set at 76795. So yeah, that would be 1.2 million.
Yeah, 1.2 million would be those, that would reflect those units being out of service for the year, yes, ma'am.
You know, I wouldn't object to an agreement of a $1.2 million temporary
Mhm.
reduction to be reassessed
Absolutely.
by
Then how does it
inspection
get
in the
back on
fall
the road?
for next year.
Yeah, we probably just saw it go back over.
actually, based on the agreement, it will.
Wait, hold on, we
That
might
guy-
have to
that guy
redo
knows
this.
he's-
She's doing more research as she's going through this, so I apologize. Because initially she said yes, but then I'm gonna read you the statute. It says K, it's in K, where the statute's at. It says, in the event improvements on land or personal property located therein or thereon are destroyed or partially destroyed, or the land itself is impaired or partially impaired by fire, lightning, storms, winds, floodwaters, overflow of streams, or other cause of all such destruction of or impairments being referred to here as damage during any year, the county assessor shall determine the amount of damage and shall reassess the property for that year at the fair cash value of the property, taking into account the actual loss of functional use of the property occasioned by such damage. The assessor shall make the appropriate value adjustments to the property for the tax year up to the time at which the assessor publishes the assessor's report to the excise board as required by subsection B of section 2867 of this title. After such time, adjustments can be made only by the county board of tax roll corrections and only after the assessor has certified the tax roll that year. The board secretary shall notify property owners in advance of the time and place at which value adjustment to the property will be heard by the board. The board of tax roll corrections is authorized only to approve or reject the value adjustment submitted by the county assessor. And she said, this is from the statute. The cold is actually not listed. And she says, if I understand the damage wasn't caused because of extreme and frozen pipes, that would not be an act of God.
Yeah, I like the word storms in there a lot.
I know.
So did I hear the assessed value wouldn't change?
Right. So
Yeah, we may not be able to do it.
we would not be able to do it. You may
It's a-
have to actually see if you can file something through the Board of Tax Roll Corrections and see if you can get that board to and maybe do some more research on the actual statute
Mhm.
and see if you can actually get the value that way.
Okay, no, that makes sense. I mean, like I said, I wasn't sure. I've never really dealt with storm damage for a client. I've dealt with it working at the county, but not.
Right, yeah, we've done lots of floods
Oh.
and tornadoes and fires and stuff, and that's always been pretty easy, but this one being the extreme cold, being the damage, it wasn't actually a true storm, it was
It
just.
was a winter storm.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we might, like, that's why I say you might want to do some more research and see.
Yeah.
So we just need to sustain the value at this point.
Yeah, we'll take it to the Board of Tax Roll Corrections. So if you'll share that, you'll get the.
I got a real good memory, it's just all.
Okay, thanks for doing it.
You're welcome.
So we're gonna sustain, is that?
Yeah, we worked this property last year. It's an interesting apartment complex. I mean, there's some real design flaws to it, but I feel like we've already taken a lot of that into consideration. This thing has real small closets and real odd shaped rooms and
We've taken what
Two
should
elevators.
be $125,000 unit property down to 77,000 already because of functional obsolescence. We did that last year. But this is
Well, this is in.
we visited the property together last year, went through it. And it's just, these people have never built an apartment before and you can kind of tell. As you go through it, it's, you wouldn't like it, you couldn't, like the shelf in the closet, when you go up, if you have a box that's any size, it won't go between the wall and the shelf. I mean, you can put shoes up there, but
If it's too high, I'm not gonna be able. to
there's some
do it.
walls that go along and all of a sudden they go over about 2 inches and go over here to miss the window.
There's some real functional design issues.
If you're moving in and out, you have
Based
to.
on the information
So,
I
there's not much we can do.
No, sir, no. you should-
Based on the information presented, I move that we sustain
That's right.
the
Second.
value.
Second.
Thank you, no, that's great, thank you. It's a fun one. Well, you want
Mr.
to,
Van
I kept
Dorn?
telling you.
Yes.
Ms. Gaines?
Yes.
Very well.
Okay, that's good. What do you want me? John.
Yeah, this is where you want to.
Okay.
Sustain.
This one.
Don't write it right.
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
We ought to all.
See you next week.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'll write something today, thanks.
Yeah, it's.
Sarah, don't forget to sign. All right.
And
See you.
then
The reason.
See ya.
Needs to
Okay,
go
on,
before.
I have. the,
Correction.
Artist fellowship. Remember this exemption from last year was filed by BFK. They thought since they
Tax
were
correction goes, tax roll.
that they should be exempt. So it's one of those cases where
Sure.
there is an exempt use.
Is this for the one,
Sure.
first one?
Yes. BFK.
So if
That'd
they're
be something
cleaning,
separate.
this is very remote.
I know, right?
If they're cleaning mowing.
That just drove my mind.
Not so much that, what happens, I have this artist fellowship,
Before she had that
which
big
is where she uses almost all of
Yeah.
the state. Is there a 501? So it's owned by a 501, it's used by a 501. Question is,
Save
a
it,
minute, they go back,
I know you
because they filed it and got denied, but we never really got to appeal the denial, but they
Show me
filed
more
it.
information.
Should be as much information you can, even in your application, and I'll talk to Lisa about it. It's a possibility.
Entertain a motion.
Yeah.
Determinations.
I know that we adjourn.
They second.
Yeah.
Mr. Vanderwall,
Yes.
Ms. Gaines?
Yes.
We are